Yeah, let's jump into the second one. So tip number 2 is to create a money system. And look, I'm pretty sure that in almost every single episode of our podcast, we've talked about the importance of budgeting. And to me, budgeting is always going to be something like that's going to be important for like your entire career, your entire financial journey, I should say. Like budgeting is always going to be at the core of like every solid financial plan in my eyes. And how you budget, that's probably going to evolve as you start to get deeper and deeper into that journey. But I think when it comes to creating a money system, like it's like taking a budget and then going one step further. It's not just the budget. Like a budget fits into your overall money system, but your money system is more than that. It's also about like how you manage your money in general. Like how do you organize your finances? How do you think about your finances? But Lauren, how do you think someone can take, kind of to lay the groundwork here, like how can someone take what they learned in that first part where they understand their cash flow now, they know where like some of the holes were in their spending. How can they take that and put that into a really solid budget?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, and like we've talked about many times, but taking that information and that data that you have from your, where your cash flow is, what's coming in, what's going out, and then making a plan that feels good for you. So if you don't like that you're spending $500 a month on eating out because it's providing honestly no return for you, then maybe you change that to do something different in your budget. So really the cash flow, like just understanding your cash flow is just like, checking off like what you're spending each day. But now actually taking that information and morphing it into something that you're creating, which is your budget. So that's what I did in my debt-free journey. So whenever I, took inventory of where everything was going, I was like, okay, that's not pretty. And I could be doing different things with my money. So for me, my biggest goal was debt, paying off my debt. So in my budget, one of the first things in my line items was, after my rent and my car payment and everything, was paying off those student loans and additional money towards, paying off my car as well. So really prioritizing that money and putting it towards my debt payoff. So instead of it going towards miscellaneous things at Target, I actually made a plan that was fit for my goals, So I think that's really the first place to start is taking the data and see, kind of, I don't necessarily say you have to journal about it, but look at that. What is painful for you to look at, like in your spending? Because there's going to be some place on your statements where you're like, that wasn't good, So I think you can take that information and then now you're like, okay, how do I plan my next month moving forward with the money I know I have coming in and the information I have? So I'm going to change X, Y, and Z because these are my goals moving forward,
Yeah, 100%. And I think when it comes to all things like personal finance, like you can really make it as complicated as you want it. But I feel like so many people hear the word budget and they like freak out a little bit in their head. Like they build it up to be this thing that is so complicated in their mind when in reality, like it really just doesn't have to be. Like I feel like a good budget has to do 3 things. And for me, the first thing is like, does it cover all the things that need to be covered? So like your basic necessities, like, right, like your rent, utilities, groceries, gas. Does it cover all the other bills just to make sure you can get through the month? If you have debt, does it pay those minimum payments? The second thing for me, like, all right, are you making a plan for what to do with what's left over? And then the third thing to me is, are you actually using every single dollar of your income? Like if you're doing those 3 things, that to me is like, that's going to be a good budget. Like it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Now, depending on like your income or depending on when you get paid, like you might have to do a few things to kind of make the budget work with like how you're actually paid. And then when some certain bills come in at the end during the month, but like, really like it doesn't need to be complicated. And then to your point, like if you're actually tracking everything, you're going to see like, all right, am I actually sticking to this budget? And if I'm not, like, where are the areas that I'm failing at?
Yeah, for sure. And I think also when you're talking about your money system, it can mean a few different things. Of course, like you mentioned, it's obviously the budget, but it can mean like, what kind of accounts you have. So that was one thing for me that I cleaned up. And I think a lot of people get themselves into this mess where they have a checking account here and a credit card there and, multiple credit cards probably. And it's just a little confusing and feels overwhelming. So I think that's a good place to start too. When you're trying to get your money in order in these first 90 days is to really take inventory of the accounts you have. So for me, Nick, I am super simple. I want to have one login for like every single thing I have. Yeah. So my debit, my high yield savings account, my debit card, and my credit card are all through the same company. So it's all in the same platform and I can just there it is. It's all there. I like to keep it super simple. So that's also a way that you're creating your money system, because you got to feel good about that as well. So I think that's a really good way to, kind of clean that up. And then of course, you're taking that information from, step one and really moving it into a budget. So now you know where your money is going because you're planning ahead for it. And then I also think you can start implementing some like automation in there. So if you know, a lot of people have this problem. A lot of people wait until the very end of the month and they're like, okay, I have $50 left to save, so I'll just go ahead and save that. Instead of saying up front, like, oh, I'm going to save this amount of money, you could go ahead and start transferring that in your account. If you know after your first paycheck of the month, you have a little bit of extra money you want to send into your savings, start putting that on an automated calendar, whatever. So it goes in there on the date that you want it to. Because I think that's a big part of people's finances that kind of slips away too. They don't plan these things. They don't automate anything. And then money just walks out of the account. So I think there's a lot of different things you could consider in your money system, but these are some like actionable things that you could take control of like right away.
The information, opinions, and recommendations provided on this podcast are for entertainment purposes only and do not constitute professional financial advice. Any financial decisions you make based on the content of this podcast are your responsibility. We strongly recommend consulting with a licensed financial advisor or other qualified professional before making any significant financial decisions. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that we are not liable for any financial outcomes.